Stop scrolling, because what you are about to hear was not written for the crowd. It was written for you alone. And if something inside you already tightened, already reacted, already paused for a second without knowing why, then you are not here by accident. You are here because something unseen is finally reaching you at the exact moment you could no longer ignore it. Not earlier, not later, but now. And I need you to understand something from the very beginning. This is not entertainment. This is not motivation. This is not advice. This is a recall. A remembrance of something your soul never fully forgot, even if your mind tried to. Because there was a time, before doubt, before fear, before life became noise, you knew something different about yourself. You felt it. That quiet knowing that you were not like everyone else. That your path would not follow the normal shape of life. That something about you was being watched, guided, shaped, even when you felt alone. And slowly, over time, the world tried to erase that knowing. It didn't attack you directly, it distracted you, it made you busy enough to forget. It made you tired enough to stop asking questions. It made you doubtful enough to call your intuition imagination. But here you are, still listening. That alone is not normal, because most people would have already skipped, already moved on, already dismissed this as just another video. But you didn't. Something held you here, and I need you to understand what that means. It means you are standing inside a moment that was designed to find you, specifically, not a group of people, not a general audience, you, because there is a version of your life that has been trying to reach you for a long time. But you have not been fully available to receive it. Not because you are incapable, but because you were being shaped first, and shaping always feels like pressure before it feels like purpose. There were moments in your life when you asked silently, maybe even painfully, why does nothing feel stable? Why do I keep losing what I build? Why do I feel different even when I try to fit in? Why do I feel something is coming, but it never arrives? And in those moments, you thought something was wrong with you. But what if I told you nothing was wrong? You were being separated from what could not come with you. Because not everything in your past was meant to follow you into your future. Some people were lessons. Some endings were protection. Some delays were direction, and even though it hurt, even though it confused you, even though at times it felt unfair, it was not random, it was preparation, and preparation always feels like silence before clarity. There is something you must understand about silence. Silence is not absence, silence is instruction, and your life, for a long time, has been speaking in silence, that feeling you get sometimes. When everything is calm but your heart feels like it is waiting for something bigger. That is not anxiety. That is anticipation of alignment, because deep inside you, there is a memory of something greater than what you are currently living. And that memory does not come from imagination. It comes from recognition. You recognize it because you have felt it before. In moments you cannot explain, like when you almost gave up, but something stopped you, like when everything fell apart. But somehow you were still protected, like when you lost something, and later realized you would have been destroyed if you had kept it. At the time you didn't understand, but now you are starting to see patterns. And patterns are not coincidence, they are communication. And what has been communicating with you has never stopped, even when you ignored it, even when you doubted it, even when you tried to replace it with logic. Because some truths are not understood by thinking, they are understood by remembering. And right now, something in you is remembering, not fully, not clearly, but enough to make you feel uneasy in the best way, because comfort is not what wakes you. Disruption does. And this message is a disruption, not to harm you, but to break the cycle you have been stuck inside without realizing it. Because cycles are invisible until they are broken, and yours is starting to break now. That is why things may have started feeling strange. Lately, people acting differently. Opportunities shifting, your interest changing, your patience thinning, your thoughts becoming deeper at random moments. You may have thought it was stress, but what if it is expansion? Because expansion does not feel soft at first. It feels like pressure inside a space that is becoming too small for what you are becoming. And that is where you are right now. You are not breaking down. You are breaking out. But breaking out always begins with confusion. Because the mind tries to hold on to what is familiar, even when the soul is already moving forward. and that creates tension. You feel pulled in two directions. One part of you wants stability, predictability, control. The other part of you wants truth, freedom, meaning. And that conflict inside you is not weakness. It is awakening, because only something that is alive can resist its own limitation, and you are resisting limitation right now. Even by listening to this, even by staying, even by feeling something you cannot fully explain, and I need you to understand something very clearly. You are not late, you are not behind, you are not forgotten. You are in timing that you cannot yet interpret fully, because real timing is never obvious while you are inside it. It only becomes clear when you look back and realize nothing could have happened sooner, and nothing could have been delayed. But I will tell you something most people never hear. There are moments in a life where reality itself starts responding differently to a person, not because the world changes, but because the person changes first. And when you begin to shift internally, everything around you starts adjusting quietly. Some doors close without explanation. Some people drift away without conflict. Some opportunities disappear without warning, and at the time it feels like loss. But later, you realize it was filtration, because not everything that leaves you is a loss. Some things leaving you is the beginning of accuracy. Accuracy in direction, accuracy in identity, accuracy in purpose, and that is what is beginning for you. Now, you may not see it yet, but something is aligning underneath everything you can see, and it will not announce itself loudly. It will reveal itself gradually, in ways that make sense only after they happen. And this is where most people miss it, because they expect clarity before movement. But life rarely works that way. Movement comes first. Clarity follows, and you are already in movement, whether you realize it or not. That feeling of something is about to change that keeps visiting your thoughts. That is not imagination, that is transition. And transition is always uncomfortable because it requires you to exist between two versions of yourself, the one you were and the one you are becoming, and in that space, nothing feels fully stable. But that is where transformation happens. Not in arrival, in between. And you are in between right now. Which means something about your life is closer than you think, but still invisible to your current perception. And I want you to remember this as you continue. What is meant for you does not need forcing, it needs alignment. And alignment always begins inside you first, not outside. So if you have been trying harder, pushing more, forcing outcomes, and still feeling like something is missing, it is not because you are failing. It is because you are being redirected, and redirection often feels like delay, until the moment it reveals itself as protection. And what you are being protected for has not arrived yet, but it is moving toward you, and you will recognize it not by logic, but by certainty, a quiet certainty that does not argue. It simply knows. And when that moment comes, you will understand why everything before it had to be the way it was. But for now, you are still in the unfolding, still in the preparation, still in the space where only those who are sensitive enough can feel that something greater is approaching. And you are feeling it, even if you cannot name it, even if you cannot prove it, even if you cannot explain why your heart reacts to certain words like this, because deep down, something in you remembers the direction you are supposed to walk, and it is trying to speak again. Not loudly, not forcefully, but clearly enough for you to continue listening. And if you are still here, it means you are not done yet. You are still here, and that is not something to ignore, because most people at this point would have already left, already doubted, already convinced themselves it was just a video, but you didn't leave. And that is exactly why this is continuing, because what is happening around you right now is not random curiosity. It is recognition. Something in you is starting to respond to something it has not heard in a long time. And I need you to pay attention now, more than before, because what I am about to reveal to you is not about the future. It is about what is already in motion. You just haven't seen it clearly. Yet, there are moments in life when everything feels still on the surface. But underneath that stillness, something is shifting completely, like a storm forming far away. silent, invisible, but real. And that is where you are right now, in the silence before visible change. Visual cue: calm, dark sky, faint lightning inside clouds. You may think nothing is happening. You may look at your life and feel like everything is paused, delayed, stuck. But what if I told you, stillness is often the loudest stage of transformation? Because before something becomes visible, it must first be rebuilt where you cannot see it. Inside you, there is a version of you that already exists. Not in imagination, not in hope, but in formation. And that version of you is not struggling like you are now. That version of you is not confused, not uncertain, not questioning everything. That version of you is already aligned with what you have been sensing for a long time, and that is why you feel this pressure inside you. Because two versions of you are overlapping right now, the one you are used to being and the one you are becoming. And when two versions of a person overlap, life starts to feel unstable, not because something is wrong, but because something is changing position. And I know you have had nights where your thoughts would not slow down, where silence felt heavier than noise, where you asked yourself questions you could not answer. Questions like, why do I feel something big is supposed to happen? Why do I feel disconnected from what I used to want? Why do I feel like I'm waiting for something I cannot name? And you tried to ignore it. You tried to move, and you tried to convince yourself it was just overthinking. But it kept coming back because it was never overthinking. It was awareness without explanation, and awareness like that does something to a person. It makes ordinary life feel temporary, like you are passing through something that is not your final form, and even when everything around you looks normal, inside you feel like you are not fully in place. That feeling is not confusion, it is transition. There is something important you must understand now. Not every delay in your life was punishment, not every loss was failure, not every closed door was rejection. Some of them were protection from versions of your life that would have kept you small, even if they felt comfortable, even if you wanted them badly, even if you prayed for them. Because sometimes what we ask for is not what we are ready to carry, and life does not always give you what you want. First, it gives you what you can survive first, and survival was never your final assignment. It was your beginning stage, but you stayed there longer than you were supposed to, not because you were weak, but because you were still learning what you were made for. And now that phase is ending, quietly, gradually, but definitely ending. There are signs you have already been seeing, but you may not have connected them yet. Moments where your intuition was correct even when logic disagreed. Moments where something felt off and later you found out it truly was. Moments where you almost chose a different path, but something stopped you. At the time you may have thought it was coincidence, but now you are starting to see a pattern. And patterns are how truth speaks before clarity arrives. Because truth rarely shouts, it repeats, softly, until you finally notice it. And once you notice it, you cannot unsee it again. And here is what is happening now. Your perception is shifting, not all at once, not dramatically, but internally, quietly, in ways you cannot fully explain. You are starting to question things you used to accept easily. You are starting to feel drawn toward things you used to ignore. You are starting to feel disconnected from things you once depended on, and that is not confusion, that is recalibration, because when a person is being realigned with their path, their attachment to old directions weakens first, not instantly, but gradually, like a slow release, and that release can feel like loss. Even when it is actually making space, you may feel like certain people don't understand you anymore, or like conversations feel different, or like your interests are changing without warning. That is not random. That is internal restructuring, because your external life always adjusts after your internal shift begins, never before. And this is why you feel in between, not who you were, not who you are becoming, just in transition. And that space is uncomfortable because it has no identity yet, but it has direction. Even if you cannot see it clearly, there is something else you must understand. What is coming into your life next will not match your past patterns. It will feel unfamiliar at first, not because it is wrong, But because it is new to your system and unfamiliar, does not mean unsafe, it only means unrecognized. And this is where most people make their mistake. They reject what they do not recognize. They return to what feels familiar instead of what is aligned, and in doing so, they delay their own progression. But you are not being told this to warn. You are being told this so you can recognize what is already approaching, because something is approaching, not in a dramatic way, not with noise, but with alignment. And alignment always feels subtle before it becomes undeniable. You may not believe this yet, but there are paths that have already been adjusted for you, at opportunities that have been redirected, connections that are being rearranged, outcomes that are being rewritten in the background of your life, and none of it requires your force, only your readiness. And readiness is not action. Readiness is internal position, a quiet agreement within yourself that says, I will not return to what no longer fits me, even if it feels familiar, even if it feels safe, even if it feels easier, because what is easier is not always what is meant, and what is meant is not always what is easy, and I know you can feel it. That strange sense that something is close, not physically, not logically, but internally, like your life is holding its breath before a shift. And you are right, it is, but here is what I need you to understand deeply. What is coming will not arrive with confusion. It will arrive with recognition, a quiet certainty that does not need explanation. You will not need to force it. You will not need to question it. You will simply know. And when that happens, you will look back at this moment, at this exact point in your life, and you will realize this was not delay, this was preparation for recognition. And you are closer than you think, not because time is running, but because alignment is completing. You are still here. And by now, something inside you is no longer the same as when you first started listening. Not because I told you anything new, but because something inside you started remembering what it already knew. And that is the part most people never understand. Real awakening does not begin with information, it begins with recognition. Quiet inner reaction that says, I have felt this before. I just forgot. And if you are feeling that, even slightly, even silently, then you are already inside the shift. But I need you to slow down your thoughts for a moment. Because what I'm about to tell you now is not just continuation, it is the deeper layer. The part most people never reach because they stop too early. They hear the message, but they do not stay long enough to understand what the message is doing to them. And you stayed, which means you are not receiving this like others. You are receiving this differently. There are shifts in life that do not announce themselves, no warning, no obvious sign, no dramatic moment. They begin quietly, in the background of your emotions, in the way your thoughts start changing direction without permission, in the way your old desires start feeling unfamiliar, in the way your silence becomes heavier but more meaningful at the same time. And right now, you are inside that type of shift. You may think your life is still normal. You wake up, you do what you need to do, you talk to people, you scroll, you distract yourself, but underneath all of that, something deeper is reorganizing you. Like invisible hands are adjusting the direction of your internal compass. And the strange part? You cannot control it, you can only notice it. And I know there are moments when you feel like you are standing in the same place in life for too long, like nothing is moving forward, like everything is paused. But what if I told you, you are not paused, you are being separated from noise, because direction cannot be heard clearly when everything is loud, and your life has been loud for too long. Not outside, but inside. There is a reason your thoughts have not been stable. There is a reason your emotions have been unpredictable. There is a reason certain memories return without invitation. And there is a reason your intuition keeps interrupting your logic, because something inside you is refusing to stay asleep, and sleep is what kept you aligned with your old life, but now sleep is breaking. And most people ignore those moments, they dismiss them, they move on, they say, I'm just overthinking. But you did not fully ignore them, because something inside you kept returning to them. And anything that keeps returning is not random, it is unresolved meaning. Now listen carefully. There is something happening around your life that you are not fully seeing yet. Not physically, not externally, but structurally, like the foundation of your current path is being replaced while you are still walking on it, and that is why it feels confusing, because you are changing direction without seeing the full map. But let me tell you, something most people never hear clearly. You do not need to see the full map to be in the right direction. You only need to recognize when your inner resistance stops fighting. And right now, something inside you is already softening, even if you don't notice it consciously, even if your mind still doubts. Something deeper is listening. And that deeper part of you is the part that has always known more than your thoughts. It is the part that warned you before mistakes. It is the part that pulled you away from certain paths. It is the part that made you hesitate at certain moments, and every time you ignored it, you later understood why it was right, but now it is not warning you anymore. It is guiding you forward, quietly, consistently, without pressure, and this is where your life starts to feel different. Because guidance does not always feel like clarity. Sometimes it feels like confusion leaving your system, like old certainty dissolving, like familiar things losing their emotional weight, like your past self becoming less dominant inside you, and that can feel strange, because you were used to being a certain version of yourself, even if that version was tired, even if that version was stuck, even if that version was confused, it was still familiar. And familiarity creates illusion of stability. But stability is not the same as alignment, and now alignment is beginning to replace familiarity. Quietly, step by step, moment by moment, without asking your permission, because alignment does not negotiate with old identity, it replaces it. And I know there are nights when your mind becomes too loud, when you lie down and suddenly everything feels deeper than usual, your past, your choices, your regrets, your possibilities, and you start thinking about life in a way you didn't used to, not surface thoughts, but deeper questions, and those questions feel uncomfortable because they do not have simple answers. But here is what you must understand. Those questions are not meant to be solved immediately. They are meant to expand you, because expansion always begins with uncertainty, not certainty. And if you look closely at your life recently, you will notice something strange. You are less interested in distractions that used to satisfy you. You are less emotionally attached to things that once felt important. You are more sensitive to truth, more aware of energy, more aware of people's intentions, more aware of your own inner reactions. And that is not overthinking, that is refinement. Because when a person is being refined, their sensitivity increases first, not their strength, not their success, their sensitivity, because sensitivity is what allows alignment to be recognized. And I need you to understand something very clearly now. You are not becoming weaker. You are becoming more aware. And awareness always feels heavier before it feels powerful. There is something else happening too. You are starting to lose interest in old versions of success. Things that used to impress you no longer feel meaningful. Things you used to chase no longer feel worth the same effort. And you might think this is confusion, but it is not. It is redefinition. Because your direction is not just changing. Your definition of important is changing. And when that happens, your entire life structure begins to reorganize itself slowly, quietly, but permanently. And this is why you cannot go back fully to how you used to be, even if you try, even if you distract yourself, even if you attempt to ignore what you are feeling. Something inside you has already moved forward. And once something inside you moves forward, it does not fully return to its old position. It can pause, it can hesitate, but it does not reset. And that is what is happening to you right now. You are not becoming someone else overnight. You are becoming someone you have always been underneath. Everything you learned to be. And I know this may not make full sense yet, but understanding is not required at this stage. Recognition is enough. And if you are still here, then recognition has already begun, because there is a moment coming in your life where something will feel undeniably right. Not logical, not debated, not analyzed, just known. And in that moment, everything you felt in this message will suddenly connect, like scattered pieces finally forming a single picture. But until that moment arrives, You are in the becoming, and becoming is not loud. It is subtle. It is internal. It is almost invisible from the outside. But everything is changing inside, and if you are still listening, it means you are not resisting it anymore the way you used to. Something inside you is allowing it, even if your mind is still unsure, even if your logic is still questioning. The deeper part of you is already moving. And that is why this message found you, not to tell you who to be, but to remind you that you are already becoming it.